Up next, we have Zyori and Aron from Crypto Unicorns. Come on up, guys. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Hello. Hey, that's not our unicorn. Hello, Rare Evo. All right. Aron, I'm really excited. Today we're going to talk about surviving the dark forest of Web3 game development.
Love it.
Of course, the dark forest is an area in the Crypto Unicorns portion of the metaverse, so something a little bit on the nose there. But Web3 game development very much does feel like a dark forest. I've heard you use that analogy before of like we're trudging to the middle of the underground to the center of the earth, and we have this lantern, and we can see a few feet in front of us, and that's about it. And you've got to adapt on the fly. So really excited to dive into it. But you're CEO, founder. I would love just a high level of your history as an entrepreneur in game development and blockchain.
Sure. I started as an entrepreneur in 2009. I happened to be 19. Started a mobile gaming company, so was very early to the mobile gaming wave, and have carried that through 15 years in software entrepreneurship, predominantly in mobile free-to-play games, until we pivoted in August of 2021 to Web3 and everything that comes with that.
A big change from the bloody red ocean of Web 2 mobile game development, where it's very much figured out, very much big money that you have to go up against, whereas Web 3, a lot of unknowns, but it still very much feels like this blue ocean where there's a lot to still be innovated upon and a lot of room for people to come in and have an impact.
Absolutely. I mean, prior to the pivot, we were building mobile Forex strategy games. In fact, we were building the next Game of Thrones MMO for WB. And that is about the most competitive sector of the entire mobile gaming market. So mobile as a mature market, definitely blood red ocean, Forex strategy, the bloodiest part of that ocean. So yeah, the opportunity to get away from that and just dive into a completely new space, blue ocean, opportunity for smaller companies like us to really succeed and scale. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention Axie Infinity at some point in this storytelling. I joined Axie Infinity, or Sky Mavis, I guess it was like May of 2021, right as the bull run started. The original Genesis egg sale of Crypto Unicorns was October 2021. So
correct.
Sort of as that cycle was really just taking off, I remember buying some unicorns right at the very beginning. I worked at Axie for about 1.5 years, and then 6 months ago, I switched teams, and now I'm happy to be with Laguna Games and working on Crypto Unicorns. Play to earn isn't that sexy term that it used to be. There was a moment there where I really thought that was the revolution for gaming. This is the new floor. And of course, things have changed a lot since then. But Unicorns has done a lot of volume. You had a successful private sale, ICO kind of token sale, as well as quite a bit of volume in the secondaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the space of 6 months, we'd sold over $35 million in tokens of the fungible and non-fungible flavors. We'd seen over, I guess to date now, we've seen over 50 million in secondary volume on our collections, across all of our collections. And since we launched the game in May of 2021, 2022.
May 2022.
It's all running together. We've seen over $10 million in peer-to-peer transaction volume inside of the game, with thousands of player accounts. So it's really been a pretty incredible ride from struggling in Web 2 to just immediately diving into Web 3 and seeing some pretty immediate success. Of course, we launched the game May 5th. The bear market kicked off that week. It's been a brutal 16 plus months, but we're still here. We're seeing growth and beginning to see the pieces of our roadmap really fall together. That was pitched 2 years ago now when the white paper launched.
Yeah, and obviously this conference isn't gaming specific, a lot of Cardano folks here. So I kind of want to take a step back and really mention with the stage set, managing in-game real asset economies is really, really hard. Just like managing real world economies is really hard. Talk to us a little bit about the role that developers play in this new relationship in the kind of blockchain gaming world now that like tokens and these economic elements are so deeply rooted into the game, both inside and out, right?
For sure. I mean, in Web 2, you have command and control over the economy. So it's very easy to correct things. If you have a system that's inflating an asset, you can make a change tomorrow and you're fine. Obviously, when you're a real Web3 dev, you've actually issued assets on chain that players have agency over, like you really are out of control. And the surface area that you control is much smaller. And it's nearly impossible to predict human behavior accurately when there's enough variables involved. And that's probably the greatest struggle that we have, right? We can design a system that we think is awesome, and players will see a way to exploit it, or players will not feel it is worth the time or the effort necessary. And so it's a constant balancing act, and honestly a race against time in some cases. So yeah, the challenge is, and I do think many game devs in the space today are either being ignorant to the challenge or simply misunderstand the level of difficulty that they're kind of taking on. We're talking Diablo Nightmare Mode 11 or some shit here.
Well, what flips the script on its head is that in traditional gaming, right, the developer controls everything. If you were to compare it to a governance model, it's like a dictatorship. They own the IP, they have full rights over that, and there's nothing inherently unfair about that. That's kind of capitalism and IP ownership at its finest. But the players are the ones for games that have these active, they need player liquidity for PvP, they need players to participate in the economy. They are the ones that fundamentally are providing the value that push the needle forward and create that dynamic gameplay that's so exciting. And in this Web3 world, a lot of the shift has been about putting the money in the hands of the players, right? In our world, you can breed these unicorns together. We sold the first 10,000. That's what the players bought as eggs. And then after that, it's on the players to hatch them, breed them, pass them forward, and sell them amongst each other. All of that money being traded in the economy is owned by the players. That's really awesome, that's really powerful, and that creates a lot of user loyalty because they actually get to own those assets and have some control. But as you mentioned, it also comes at this opportunity cost of giving players more agency, more voices, more democracy can also mean more chaos if you don't have a system there to support it.
Well, exactly, and that's the whole point of the DAO and the governance token, right? A lot of projects in the space have issued these governance tokens that really govern nothing. We have one of the most active game DAOs in the space. Maybe only Decentral Games, who I know is a sponsor here, has had more proposals go forward to their DAO.
Splinterlands has been doing pretty well also. They've had quite a few.
Two. We'll give them two. So, I'm enormously kind of proud of what we've achieved with the DAO and how much we've let players make decisions over both the meta inside the game as well as even the macro economics of the smart contracts on chain and things of that nature. And it's fundamentally through that mechanism of governance that we effectively bring the players to the table and say, give your feedback. And I know a lot of developers, particularly those still in Web 2, are like, you're fucking crazy, why are you even involving players at that level? This is an insane concept really coming from the OG developers. And I think every single time that we've embraced community and leaned into transparency, it's led to ultimately a better product. I think if you really take governance seriously as a way to bring feedback in through a process and iterate on that feedback, it makes a stronger product and honestly a tighter product cycle than what we would see in Web 2, where you're just looking at data, you really don't have a direct line to your players. So a lot of benefits come with governance despite some hassles.
Yeah, it's all about trade-offs, but certainly a lot of benefits, and the devil's in the details. There are a lot of different ways you can calibrate your governance system, as many know. There have to be checkpoints along the way where you have councils, you have reviews, you have impact reports. You want it to be open so that people can put proposals forward, but you can't have it be so open and easy that could be an attack vector where somebody can spam you with proposals or filibuster endlessly or all sorts of other sort of stealthy ways of adding chaos to the DAO. But one of the things about blockchain gaming that is, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts because it's gotten a lot of flack over the last year or so as token prices have gone down. But for a lot of these games, the two token model has made a lot of sense, or the dual token model. One of them being a governance token, in our case, the RBW token. This is for votes in the ecosystem, voting on proposals and having that kind of agency. It is also connected to the game loop in terms of rewards, but much smaller compared to the game token, which has a much different structure. Generally, they have an infinite supply. They're minted. They're actually burned in different game transactions, and they're used for part of that game loop, often for breeding or for crafting items, and both as a rewards tool and a way of creating, like, hey, you have to put a cost input to create this item, right? So two kind of different use cases, but they work together in these complex economies to provide value for players. How do you feel about the two token model now, having been a year and a half live in the market with a live game? If you could go back in time, would you recommend to yourself, hey, let's do this two token model?
I think so. The flexibility that it enables, given one of the tokens is an infinite mint burn token, where the other one, of course, is a finite supply token. It allows the game token, the infinite mint burn supply token, to scale with the game economy over time. A good example of this is, like, we've minted maybe 180 million unim on chain to date. We would need 300 million unim to evolve all of the babies in existence today, right? So you can look at that and go, oh, I see how this economy is going to scale over time. As new players come in, right, there's not just going to be this completely oversupply or inflation of unim, because there's plenty of additional utility that gets added with each new participant in the economy. And then on the flip side, with the governance token, the huge benefit is obviously just going to be making that finite. In our case, having a real DAO and real governance. Now you're rewarding the most strategic, the most skillful players within your ecosystem with governance rights, with the ability to actually affect and influence the sandbox.
And as far as I know, we were the first game, maybe there was another one, but the first one that was on my radar to create this staking mechanism where in Crypto Unicorns world, you get badges for different achievements or different things in the ecosystem well done. You can take those badges and stake them in the governance area where you have all of your staking, your staked RBW, and it actually amplifies the amount of voting power you have in the ecosystem. So the idea is that the players that are the most active participate the most and complete the most game loops get this disproportionate share, this amplifier on their voting power as kind of a hedge against, the whales. People always wonder what happens if somebody has a lot of money and comes in and buys your entire DAO. It's like, well, yeah, that's scary. That's something that is a potential attack vector. So creating mechanisms where the players get rewarded not just financially, but for their time investment and impact in the contributions through gameplay to the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the opportunity with staking V2 was, let's disproportionately reward the players who are active, who are engaged, who are at the top. And we had been giving out all these soulbound badges for over a year at that point, and it was a perfect opportunity to say, oh, we're just going to put weight to these badges that are non-transferable, that are your kind of merit badge of achievements inside of our game, inside of our DAO. And to your point, yes, it amplifies their voting power in ways that I think drives a more meritocratic system and not one that's necessarily just driven by token ownership.
As more time goes on, it seems abundantly clear to me that the best systems, the healthiest gaming ecosystems are the ones that are dynamic in nature and have less of this kind of linear progression or just straight time unlocks when it comes to tokens, and more of these things that try to scale with demand, scale with market conditions. This is still early stuff that people are experimenting with.
For sure.
But I think it's really important. And we should talk about deflation a little bit, because the first question when you talk about breeding, I think, is people go, okay, well, what happens when there's 1 million unicorns or 10 million unicorns? And the optimistic side of me goes, well, let's hold on a second. If we really believe blockchain is going somewhere, we're going to need a lot of assets at some point to accommodate the needs of all these people. So it is amazing that the system is built to be able to scale if we ever did have 1 million daily active users. in theory, you could breed enough unicorns to accommodate that over
Correct.
enough time with demand. However, what do we do when that demand subsides and there's all these leftover unicorns? How do we create burn mechanisms that are powerful? You know, if you've played any blockchain game, you've probably heard players say, we need more burn mechanisms. If you were around Axie Infinity, that was for an entire year. I want to burn my Axies, I want to burn my SLP. But the real conundrum is, how do you incentivize people to do it? Because what is burning? It's lighting your own money on fire.
Yeah.
You know, the game theory doesn't check out. Everyone's sitting there waiting for everyone else to light their tokens on fire, hoping that their own will go up. But guess what? Nobody wants to volunteer to do that. So now we're starting to get into this era of how do we create game loops that actually incentivize this kind of behavior. As you could say, maybe negative expected value for the player, but positive expected value for the outcome, or for outcome for the economy, because the economy needs that. If everybody beats the economy at every moment, then the economy implodes.
Exactly, yeah. It is one of the regrets that I have is how quickly we pivoted in the space and launched a game, right? I mean, we just kind of jumped off the cliff and started building the plane on the way down. So it has taken us a while with respect to unicorns to put a deflationary mechanism in. My recommendation for any project in the space is to have that baked in day one, and certainly future projects of ours will have that, right? With crypto unicorns and obviously the Shadowcorn arc of the roadmap about to kick off, you're going to have effectively unicorns with a chance of dying in the dark forest, which is going to be super unfortunate.
It's going to get real dark.
It happens.
Yeah.
And then Shadowcorns will actually eat or burn unicorns to ascend. So you kind of have this Shadowcorn collection, which very quickly, for those unaware, is a 3K limited supply collection that was minted for free via participation in the original Dark Forest minigame that we put out in February of 2022 for anyone who had a Genesis unicorn at that time.
Yeah.
And so the combination of the Shadowcorns eating unicorns, consuming them, some of the Shadowcorn minions will even utilize soul power, which is what you get when a unicorn is destroyed.
Yeah.
All helps to create that kind of deflationary pressure on the collection. And then this wonderful feature y'all previewed this week is gems and the gem works. So this will be the first opportunity for you to progress unicorns that you have without needing to breed them to generate a higher stat line. And that's going to be
customization. Yeah.
very, very exciting. You know, every unicorn gets a Thanos gauntlet you can fill up. And obviously the high tier gems will require soul power. And so you take your kind of worst corns and see them out to pasture and use them to strengthen the ones that you're looking to double down on.
Yeah, and so there's two aspects of this loop that I really want to hone in on. The first being this introduces the potential for faction warfare, faction-style gameplay. You've got the unicorns that every player has, and you've got this faction of Shadowcorns that are limited supply, and you now have the good guys and the bad guys, so to speak. Not to say that all Shadowcorn holders are evil necessarily, but it opens up this kind of social world where all of a sudden the strategy isn't just beating a spreadsheet or finding this one thing to arbitrage that you can extract from, but now reacting to the gameplay decisions of your opponents. We're going to have this sort of territory-based style tug-of-war gameplay where Shadowcorns, if they control the territory or the majority of it, then unicorns aren't able to earn as much in their normal activities.
Yep.
So that incentivizes unicorns to need to fight back and rally the troops and push back the Shadowcorns out of their territory. And then, you know, it swings back the other way. And now, now the Shadowcorns aren't earning as much as they would because the unicorns are encroaching. And that dynamic sort of warfare opens up a whole new set of levers that you can start to pull, and the opportunity for these new sort of gameplay hooks that allow players to make emotional decisions, like revenge, for example. You know, wanting to spend extra to attack a specific area or dominate at a specific time on the board. It opens up the door for that whole thing. So the faction kind of social side is totally one part of it. The other is finding this way of, okay, sometimes unicorns can die, but it's not that often. And when they do, there's opportunities to kind of give rake back. You know, we have the unicorn soul power that will come back when the unicorn dies. And it creates this great loop where you're almost playing for keeps. You know, it's hardcore mode, so both sides know somebody's gonna die. So if you're the victor, then you get some extra loot, and if you die, then you know that you were gonna die. And if it flips the other way, it kind of cuts the same where nobody feels like they lost. Nobody feels like it was unfair, but something still gets burned. For the ecosystem, some of that resource that went into that unicorn that died gets lost into the metaverse forever.
Yeah, and what this should do is have the supply of unicorn NFTs kind of naturally dip if the player base remains relatively steady or is increasing very slowly. If it starts to increase more quickly as new participants join the economy, you're going to see inflation creep back up, but in a way where there's enough new demand to meet that and support price a little better. I think at the end of the day, providing more stability within the system is ultimately kind of the goal and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I often hear people suggest, or at least historically I've heard people suggest, what really amounts to just in-game taxes. Something like, imagine if your unicorns now get hungry and you need to feed them a certain amount of tokens or else they get depleted, and if they're depleted, then they no longer can operate. It's like, well, that does work, and it certainly would burn some tokens, but the psychology is really inverted from the system we just described, where it just doesn't feel good. And it also disproportionately impacts the new players or the poor players that are coming in, because it's just a flat tax. So it makes it even harder for those new players to catch up, and that gets scary. You need ways for new players to come in and be able to close the gap, but not take too much value away from those that have been playing for a long time.
For sure, kind of balancing. And recently, via the survey you conducted with the team, we found we had about 50% OGs who've been playing the game pretty much daily since May 5th of last year, and about 50% are new players, and in particular players, 90 days and less, given our recent growth that we've started to see. And that's very interesting, because now we are balancing noobs versus these OGs who have massive estates, hundreds of corns, and that is very challenging. I think we're addressing it via the new onboarding programs and a lot of what we've done, where if I send you an offer to your wallet, or you come in via a campaign and give us your wallet, we can automatically enroll you in these noobs programs and these onboarding programs. So your progression early on is helped, while avoiding the opportunity for OGs to kind of take advantage of that. So I'm very excited to see those systems, which the first version launched this Thursday, and then we'll see with the release next month in Mailbox, the opportunity to kind of put forward an even more advanced version of that program.
Yeah, and one of the other things, a very recent experiment we conducted, is our first clan leaderboard. A very simple MVP, right? Just allowing players to group up, have a shared tag, and anytime they do an action in the game, some points get contributed to a shared guild score of everyone that's tagged up. And this is everything across the ecosystem, so farming, crafting, playing our PvP mini games, participating in jousting, a lot of different archetypes that can still be competitive. And the idea is that we have it calibrated right, so you could be a guild that's maybe all in on breeding or all in on jousting, and you don't have to play the PvP games if you don't want to, or vice versa. And we're about 48 hours into the launch of that leaderboard, and we've definitely seen a disproportionate spike across the board as everyone fights for this early contender slot. We also set it up so there's eliminations every week, so there's this incentive to push and make sure you're staying above that threshold. The power of competition is not to be underestimated. And I know this because I come from esports. I have an esports background, and that is the basic value proposition that all of esports is predicated on. You have a tournament where only 10 people can win, 100 people pay to register because all 100 of them think they have a chance to win, but only 10% can win. Guess what? The tournament gets the extra value of those people that don't make it to the top 10. And that's what those systems need to be able to sustain. So sharing that anecdote makes me very happy to see that the competitive nature of, we're not an esports game, but some of that psychology and ethos is translating to show that when in doubt, humans will be competitive, and they will spend a little bit of extra money for that prestige of being number one, even if there's no financial value attached to that prestige.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the ways that we think you build sustainable economies in this space, is you have to introduce a very strong sense of cooperative PvP, which can be single player or player versus player, kind of just 1v1 as well. But I think it's really magic at the tribe or kind of clan level, where you get a whole group of people together and get them kind of looking to kind of smash each other's shit for glory. And it works. We saw this work very well in mobile 4X strategy when we were still in Web 2, and As different as the Unicorn game is from Battle Strike Force, our last title, there's still some of the kind of fundamentals that we saw work very well before that we're looking to kind of reapply.
Yeah, I mentioned revenge earlier, but that's another really powerful archetype where people are willing to disproportionately spend for a very specific outcome. It can kind of go hand in hand with the griefing type archetype. For anyone that's played World of Warcraft, you've probably experienced that archetype of player who doesn't raid, doesn't do dungeons, all they do is stack potions and hide in the world so that they can kill you when you're trying to complete your quest, right? Their only goal is to slow you down and make you want to throw your keyboard out the window. They don't care about financial return or that traditional sort of how much gold am I making per hour equation, right? There's an anecdote that I always like to share of anyone who's familiar with EVE Online, right? One of the greatest economy games of all time, still going strong, coming up on 2 decades. They're known for being maybe a little pay to win. All this money comes in, people level up their ships. You get to this point of, okay, how do we get people to actually burn these ships that are worth millions of dollars of cumulative investment? And there was a little story I heard once that at EVE FanFest one year, one of the big alliance leaders or corporation leaders made an insulting comment against one of the other corporation leaders' wives. And that was all they needed for the full send, all-out warfare. And a lot of ships got burned in that battle because it wasn't about financial min-maxing anymore. That corporation had spent how many months, how many years min-maxing to beat the game to finally get to this point where it's like, okay, we got all this artillery, we finally found a target. And the end result was, well, the economy had a lot of resources burned. And the devs were just sitting there on their screens sort of watching this unfold like, a little drama can go a long way. Adding that human element is a way to kind of break the spreadsheet warrior nature of this game. And I always just found that anecdote both comical and also very powerful for design principles in these sorts of economies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's no better example in Web 2 than EVE. So we've certainly looked at a lot of their systems design and how they've literally use conflict to keep the economy in balance. And so that's a big part of obviously the Shadowcorns versus the Unicorns, and us basically kicking off this arc of the roadmap in early September. So I'm pumped to kind of be at that phase. The early clan engagement is such a great sign for the release of Tribes, which will kind of bring that into the core gaming experience and let everyone kind of group up their land together and begin competing within the actual world itself. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here. It took 18 months of building to get here, but
yeah,
it's nice to have the foundation in place and really be putting the finishing touches.
Absolutely. And one of the last kind of mechanics, I guess, I wanted to highlight where you can get these positive expected value moments for the economy. How do we get players excited to spend money into the economy and not feel like it's a donation or expecting to get, an extra dollar for every dollar they put in? The classic example, of course, that you see on Twitter all the time, fun. If your game was just fun, then people would play. And this one drives me crazy because, there's thousands of video games made every month. Like, not on blockchain even, just Web 2 games, and most of them fail. Like, basically all of them fail. And for the ones that make it, they generally have a really high marketing budget, and that margin of money made is actually not as high at the end as you might think. So I don't think it's as simple to say as like, it has to be fun. Yes, it needs to be fun, but for your blockchain game to succeed, you need this marriage of fun and these economic elements that give players agency. But it all has to be calibrated on this very delicate system. So sorry, that narrative always just drives me crazy. Like, just make a fun game, Aaron, and people will play it. It's just not true. That's just not how the world works. It needs to be fun and then also have like 4 other things all line up at the same time to hit that blockbuster growth that everybody's chasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nothing has certainly changed about making games. It does have to be fun. Like, thank you, check.
Yes.
Beyond that, I mean, the joke we have internally is it's hard enough to build a game and just get it to market in the first place. Like, that's just an achievement in and of itself. If you're managing an economy, even a free-to-play Web 2 economy, it's still very difficult to not screw that up. We've made it exponentially harder by giving players actual agency over their assets, giving players real assets. That's one thing that's just incredible to me, is the stakes are much higher. This is real in ways that Web 2 just cannot compete with. And then as if that isn't hard enough, we're also trying to build a government. I mean, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, what have I done?
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. So as we get closer to the end here, one of the very last things I want to highlight is jackpots and gambling. because we see this a lot in Web3. There's obviously a lot of Web3 casinos, which ironically, that transparency is a real value prop to see that they are offering the odds that you think they are. But it's trickled into gaming, and there's been so many of these blockchain games that are really just sort of gambling mechanisms with a very small game layer. However, players vote with their wallets, and in traditional games, people love gacha. People love loot boxes. Pokemon cards are popular for a reason. It's a great dopamine hit to open a pack and get that shiny, flashy, whatever the hell they call them these days. I'd love to hear your thoughts about where that fits into Web3 gaming. We had an anecdotal moment not that long ago where we reduced a spot in the game where you have an opportunity to get a jackpot pull from our gathering cart, and it was a pretty big source of emissions, and we nerfed it, and our players got really, really upset. And I didn't realize how much they liked chasing that jackpot. And it was so fascinating to hear many of them say, hey, this is one thing where I know that I'm losing money on it, but I still do it because I love the thrill of hitting jackpots. And I needed to reflect on that because I didn't value jackpots nearly as much as some of our players did. So I'm curious where you fit on that spectrum of like how much gambling and these sort of like RNG type mechanics feel appropriate before it swings the other way and players go, okay, now this is too random.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the difference between making it a part of the core primary loop, right, versus having it be inside of ancillary loops like the gathering card or the loot boxes, which we reward players for achievement on leaderboards and progression and things of that nature, right? So I think it has to be incorporated in the right way, but there's no question that having RNG and some chance-based loops within your overall economy are certainly a good idea. Again, look at social casino games, which are on Web 2, which are still doing billions of dollars a year. Like, very clearly there is interest there. I wouldn't say we're exclusive to that at all because that's not the core loop of the game, but I do see it as a supporting part of the ecosystem and economy.
And even though as competitors, we want the best player to win, we want it to be a meritocracy, all of the best games in the world have some random element.
Absolutely.
Right, like a game that is truly 100% skill really isn't that fun because the best player literally always wins. And everybody loves a good underdog story. So I always think about that of like the balance is what's important, but you do need a little spice in there. But I wanted to highlight that because as we come to a close with our talk here, like it really does feel like the gaming industry is ready for a big shakeup. I mean, that is
for sure
fundamentally why I'm here, why I believe in Web3 gaming. You know, I believe in blockchain on a much higher order as money and store of value. I think gaming will be a big on-ramp for that, but we seem to be stuck in this cycle where the most popular games are like, why is World of Warcraft Vanilla the most popular title that Blizzard has at the moment? Like, that blows my mind. That game's 20 years old. Yeah. It is an amazing game. It's a masterclass game, but why haven't we seen that same level of innovation, right? Like, VR didn't do it. AR maybe is going to do something, but this feels like the first real shakeup where we're flipping this script of taking the goal of existing devs that seems to be, how do we extract as much money as possible from our users, charge them $90 for the game, then sell them a battle pass, and then sell them some skins for $20 a pop, and don't let them sell them or trade them with each other. We're trying to flip the script on that with these Web3 economies.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, Web 2, there is a misalignment of incentives between players and developers. A developer really just wants to extract as much value out of its player base as it can. That's just the business model. That's the way it is. In Web 3, it's all about giving the majority of the value to the players who are the ones creating that value through their investment of time and money in this experience that you've created. So that, to me, is the power of this space and why change is kind of needed and will ultimately happen.
And also why that paradigm might be slow, because the folks that are making a lot of money in the existing paradigm, I think they know the writing on the wall, but they have no incentive to adopt it sooner than it's going to happen. So it's on us, the users, to push for our rights in these digital nations. But that's it. That's what we're all about. The unicorns are on the front of this gaming revolution. If you want to come chat with us, we're going to be in Cottonwood 2 after this. We'd love to go deep, answer your questions, and chat all things blockchain. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, all.
Claim your official proof of participation in Rare Evo 2023. Whether you attend physically or tune in on the live stream, you get a free NFT painted by Brendan O'Connell live from our Expo Hall floor, and you get whitelisted for the Rare Perks NFT presale. By claiming, you will be entered into a giveaway of multiple rewards, including the original one-of-one physical painting by Brendan, along with exclusive access and opportunities for Rare Evo 2024, including but not limited to free general admission and VIP passes, a 10x10 booth, workshop space, and more.